Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Russell Matthews here, and this is the first video in a series where I do deep dives on specific parts of the budget that may apply to you. Now, this one is going to be all about the CRB and the CRCB, and there have been some pretty major changes that you need to know about. You may have heard that there might be a reduction of around $800 for the CRB going forward into the future, but when does this happen? Is it going to apply to you? Is there going to be an extension of the benefit on top of that? And is the government going to actually be allowed to make these changes without going through the entirety of the House of Commons process in order to draft new legislation? Well, we're going to cover all of that in today's video. But before we do, make sure to check out the link in the description where you can get 50% off the Money Mastery program, where we cover everything related to money that you should have been taught in high school: investing, personal finance, how to save more, earn more, and invest more. So if you're interested in that, you can get 50% off with coupon code LAUNCH. All right, let's get into the details and all these changes to these recovery benefit programs that have just been announced as of yesterday. All right, so this is the actual 724-page budget, and I found the portion here that is all about the CRB and the CRCB. Now, they lay out their plans here for this program in the future, but there are still some questions that are uncertain about whether or not they can do what they say they're going to do, as well as who's going to have this applied to them, but we're going to get into that in a moment. Now, let's just dive into the text here, and then we're going to break it down to make it more clear on exactly what this means for you and anyone else that you know who's on CRB who you might want to send this video to so they can be updated on the program. So they start out by saying that the government proposes to provide up to 12 additional weeks of income support for claimants who will start exhausting their 38 weeks of Canada Recovery Benefit CRB on June 19th, 2021. Now, if this June 19th, 2021 date sounds familiar to you, well, it might be because for the people who have started taking the CRB and receiving the CRB applied to it right when the program started, way back at the beginning of October, end of September of 2020, well, you might have remembered that they only had a set amount of periods, 2-week periods, that you could apply for. Now we've actually seen an extension of this all the way to June 19th, providing that you can actually have 19 application periods instead of the 13 that it originally was. Now, what they're proposing here is that they're going to extend the benefits an additional 12 weeks on top of the extension that's already happened for the CRB, and that this should take you all the way until September at the minimum. We're going to get into that in a second. They go on to say that the first 4 of these additional 12 weeks will be paid at $500 per week, the same as it is right now, and the remaining 8 weeks will be paid at a lower amount of $300 per week. Now, a couple people were upset about this because it's obviously a lot lower. You're going to see around $1,200 per month, maybe even closer to $1,100, maybe even closer to $1,000, depending on how much tax they hold back, like they have been doing with the CRB since the beginning. So that's definitely a decrease, but it really is only for these new extended weeks, these new extended periods. There are some questions around that, but we're going to get into it in a moment. They continue here saying all new Canada Recovery Benefit claimants after July 17th, 2021 would also receive the lower rate of $300 per week. Now, the question here is whether or not how they're determining who's a new applicant, right? If somebody has been on the program, maybe did it for 2 weeks to maybe 2 months at the beginning of the program, now if they come back to it, are they going to be all of a sudden at this lower rate, or are they going to be able to continue to receive the $500 per week rate? These are questions that need to be answered, and they're not inside of the budget here. As they go on here in the document, they say that the government also proposes to provide an additional 4 weeks up to a maximum of 42 weeks for the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit. So no reduction in the amount of Canada Recovery Caregiver Benefit, but also no extension here, right? We're just seeing an addition to 42 weeks. So this should take, I believe, the Canada Recovery Caregiver Benefit a little bit farther here, adding another month onto what it currently is right now, which is ending in June. So it seems like the Canada Recovery Care Benefit, if you were applying since the beginning of it, remember you had the same sort of issues where you had the set amount of periods to apply for. Well, it seems like the Canada Recovery Caregiver Benefit for people in those positions is going to end at the end of July, around July 17th. And here's where things get a little bit interesting. They say the government will also seek legislative authorities to make further extensions as necessary past September 25th, 2021, and until no later than November 20th, 2021. So they're proposing an extension to both benefits, right? You might have heard me just say, hey, the Canada Recovery Caregiver benefits not getting an extension? Well, it's not getting an extension in terms of the amount of periods you can apply for, but if you're somebody who has never been on it or has only gotten it interspersed, they're going to potentially, if they're able to do this, we're going to talk about the roadblocks that they might face, but if this actually happens, well, you'd be able to apply for the amount of periods that you have left available for you all the way into November 2021, instead of the program just ending September, and even if you had some leftover weeks or leftover periods that you could apply for, you wouldn't be able to use them. We're going to get more into this in a second, talk about the roadblocks of legislation that may cause a lot of these things to not actually happen. And they say, yeah, that's going to happen to both the Canada Recovery Benefit suite of supports, including caregiving and sickness benefits, as well as employment insurance regular benefits. Corresponding amendments to the Canada Labour Code are also proposed. So we're going to get into EI in a different video. This one's all focused on CRB, but let's break this down in a more practical way with a calendar in front of us so we can get a better idea of what these dates actually are and who's going to have these things affect them most. Okay, so this is the CRB page where they go over all the different periods, and I think it'll give us more clarity here on what's actually going on. So here, this drop-down menu shows you all the different periods that you could potentially apply for the CRB benefit. So now, again, if you've been applying since the beginning, you only have 19 periods since this most recent extension in which you can apply, and that would bring you to the end of June 19th, right? Now, what they're saying is that they're going to extend an additional 4 weeks or 2 periods for the CRB at the current rate of $500. So that would be period 20 and period 21 that you could also apply for. Now, remember, this is only for people who have been applying since the beginning. If you haven't applied since the beginning, you still have some extra periods. Well, you may be able to apply even longer than this at the $500 rate. There's still a lack of clarity around this, whether or not everyone's going to transition over to the $300 rate if after July 17th, or if people who still have weeks left of the $500 rate will continue to get that $500. There's just no answer on that right now. They haven't provided that sort of clarity around that sort of niche issue, but I'll update you when they do. So these are the 2 periods that you're going to get the full CRB, and they're proposing that it be extended for these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra periods here that you could apply for, but at a rate of $300 per week or $600 per period, right? Because you apply for 2-week periods here for the CRB. So this is what it looks like. Now, they don't list any periods after that because based on the program as it is right now and the legislation, like the laws that they wrote to bring this bill into place, well, they said, hey, it's going to permanently end at September 25th. But as we just read in that document, they're actually planning on expanding this into November now, right? They want to add additional months to the program at this $300 rate. So likely in the future, if this actually goes through, again, like I said, we're going to talk about the problem they might have implementing this stuff. You're going to see extra periods here leading all the way up until November, right? Now, whether or not they're going to actually give people more periods in which they can apply, remember, like they can extend it as long as they want, but if people don't have enough periods available to them to apply to the maximum amount of periods in the course of the year, well then the extension doesn't really mean much to people who have been on it since the beginning. It just means something to the people who haven't applied since the beginning and have some leftover periods that they can use. I hope that makes things as clear as possible when it comes to this, but to be honest, with these changes and these new proposals, there are some questions. Of course, the one I just talked about, where if people still have periods available to them that would have been at the $500 rate, like under 19 periods, or I guess now 21 periods as you add on the extra 2 periods that have now been added of the $500 CRB, well, are people going to be able to use those later in the program if they haven't used those and sort of have extra weeks, extra periods banked up? Are they going to be able to continue to get the $500 rate or $1,000 per application, or are they going to be at the $300 or $600 per period rate? This is a question that's not answered yet, but I think the biggest question that's not answered is, hey, are they actually going to be allowed to do this, one, and are they going to be able to change this without going through the House of Commons, right? We know that whenever a change has to go through the House of Commons, well, it can get held up there for a long time. Just look at the most recent Bill C-14 we've covered on the channel. Well, it was announced back in November 30th, and now it's only just made it through 3rd reading and still has some final steps to go. So this can take quite a while if it actually has to go through the House of Commons and the legislative process? Well, usually with the CRB, as they've mentioned in the past, they're able to change it not legislatively, but regulatorily, is that a word? Through regulations. So because of the way that the CRB bill is written, Bill C4, that was created back in November, well, it allows them to add more periods or and change how many periods people can apply for. Let me show you this. So they should be able to change the amount of periods that are available, but what I have concerns about is whether or not they're actually going to be able to, without passing this through the House of Commons, change the amount that you are to receive. Now, this is the Bill C4, the one that was written and brought CRB into existence. And what it says here under regulations. So again, regulations, this is something that the government can change without actually having to get it approved in the House of Commons through legislation, right? They can just regulate it instead of legislating it. And what it says is that the governor and council may, by regulation, fix a number of 2-week periods for the purpose of subsection 1. So they wrote this into the bill so that they'd have this flexibility to add more periods in the future if need be. But what doesn't seem to be written into the legislation here is an ability to change the amount that people are to receive. You'll see up here they mention how much people are supposed to get with the CRB. Subject to subsection 2, the amount of a Canada Recovery Benefit for a week is $500. So it's written there in legislation, but it doesn't, I don't believe, provide any regulatory ability to change this dollar amount. And of course, here it says subject to subsection 2, and I believe they're referring to this subsection where they just talk about if you have an income of over $38,000 in a year, you're going to have to start to pay back some of the CRB. This was already in the program before, about 50 cents for every dollar that you earn over $38,000, you have to pay back of the CRB as your income increases over time, just to make it so that people didn't receive it and then all of a sudden had a huge spike of income and didn't really need the CRB in the long term. But that's what this is subject to. And again, in here, it doesn't really have anything that would allow for them to change this dollar amount. So that's the big roadblock that I see here with this change, right? With the CRB, typically, like I said, they are able to change the amount of weeks through regulation, but I don't see anywhere in this actual bill in the text anything that would allow them to actually change how much money people are receiving per period. So that'll be interesting to see how they tackle that, and if there's some sort of workaround, some sort of loophole that I'm not seeing in here that would allow them to do this without passing it through the House of Commons and that entire legislative process that can sometimes take months. So to summarize, let's look at this document one more time. We'll go over the Coles Note version. They're going to add an additional 12 weeks of income support for the CRB, or 6 more periods, right? For the first 2 periods or 4 weeks. I don't know why they're talking in weeks now when largely the CRB is in periods, but for the first 2 periods or 4 weeks, it's the same rate. But then all of the weeks after that, they want to lower it down to $300. The CRCB is going to be extended as well to a maximum of 42 weeks. And they're hoping to be able to grant themselves the authority through legislation to extend this out until November, extend these benefits if need be, right? So that's one thing that they're 100% going to have to pass through the House of Commons if they're going to extend this past September, because right now the bill just says, hey, CRB ends at September, but if they want to extend it out until the end of November, well, they're going to have to go through the legislative process. So maybe the changes to the $300 will be included inside of that legislation because they were planning on doing it anyways. But those are that's the Coles Note versions of what this video just said, and I hope it's provided a little bit of clarity to you going forward, because there's a lot of misinformation going on out there about what this means. Is CRB going to be automatically lowered for my next payment? No, that's not going to happen. You're not going to see any changes likely until around July, if you see any changes at all. Again, this is all pending. As with everything in this budget, they actually have to execute what they're saying they're going to do. So we're going to keep our eyes peeled. Make sure to stay tuned to the channel, because if there's anything that changes, I'm going to keep you updated right here. And of course, if you haven't already done so, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you can keep on supporting Canadian content just like this, and make sure to check out the link in the description where you can get 50% off the Canada Money Mastery program, where we're covering everything investing, personal finance, everything you should have been taught about money in high school. 50% off with coupon code LAUNCH. All right, and with all that said, thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video has helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time. This channel is supported by viewers like you. Thanks, channel members.